men elder statesmen. We don't really have a word for someone like HRC because there's never been an HRC. She and Nancy Pelosi are a kind of league of their own. We're talking because Madam Secretary has a new book out, Something Lost, Something Gained. It's a line from the song Both Sides Now, which you probably know if you're a Joni Mitchell fan, or at least saw her perform at the Grammys back in February. If you don't know who Joni Mitchell is, I need you to stop listening right now. And HRC certainly has looked at a life from both sides, from up and down, from win and lose. I'm not going to sing myself, and somehow she's still around. She's just not taking long walks in Chappaqua where she's living, but she's still working and impacting politics, including as a surrogate for the Harris-Walz campaign. So we're going to talk about that, about her thoughts on last week's debate between Harris and Trump and some of the issues she's been working on. And it has a lot to do with the fate of women on this planet, but all of us, really. She's gotten a lot spicier over the years as she's gotten older, and you're sort of seeing the true Hillary Clinton that I have often seen privately. So it's going to be fun. Madam Secretary, thanks for being on.
I am so happy to be on with you.
You look ebullient, today. We have a lot. Look at you going. This is, just so you know, this is our 6th interview together, our iron anniversary, so to speak. I don't know what you got me, but I'm excited to see.
You'll get it. You'll get it.
I'll get it. Our last interview was in 2022, in Austin, a very different time, actually. You're out with a new book, which I thought was delightful. I want to talk about it in a minute, but obviously I've got to get your thoughts on Tuesday's presidential debate between Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump. Just download me. How did you feel about it? You had given Vice President Harris advice and stuff like that. Obviously, you've been on that stage. You've been stalked by Donald Trump on a stage. Talk a little bit about it and how you feel about it right now.
I feel so relieved, excited, optimistic. I knew she would do well because I had a lot of confidence both in her and the team that was preparing her. I thought would, literally get her ready for any kind of stunt he would pull or anything he might say. But she even exceeded my high expectations. I thought that her ability to expose him by triggering him so that people could see in real time this is a man who is unhinged, incoherent, and dangerous. And so the main goal of the preparation was to give her a chance to contrast herself with him so that people who are just tuning in, who, maybe Kara didn't know much about her, even though she's been vice president for 4 years, would see her in command, could envision her as president, and I think all that happened.
Yeah, she was, I call them, Audie Cornish coined this term, Kamala curious. People were very Kamala curious because they don't know her as well as they know someone like you. And you were well known when you were running for president already. People had a definition in their head for lots of different reasons, good and bad, which we'll get to in a second because you address it in your book. But you debated him 3 times during the 2016 election, and you said in the New York Times that she should try to rattle him. She clearly did. He took the bait over and over again, and not at the beginning. And I was worried. Everyone was a little worried at the beginning. Obviously, they were nervous because it had such high stakes. The thing that worked was, one, she got a real head of steam on the abortion issue, and then secondly, put in that walking out on the rallies, for example. Did you speak to her before and give her any advice ahead of the interview? You're the one who's... I
did speak to her. And
so tell me about that.
But I've been speaking with her, fairly regularly for a number of years. I've known her for a long time. Her sister Maya actually worked with me in the 2016 campaign, traveled on the plane with me. When she was running for president, when she was selected to be vice president, she would call me. She would ask for advice. When she was putting her office together, a number of the people that were advising her were people that I knew well. So there was nothing, unusual about this conversation going into the debate. Literally within, 30, 40 minutes of President Biden withdrawing and endorsing Kamala, I talked with her. She knew that Bill and I had endorsed her. So with respect to the debate, I had full confidence in the people preparing her. Karen Dunn is an extraordinary, not just debater, but incredibly smart communicator. Philippe Reines can literally channel the kind of bullying.
He played Trump.
And he channels Trump. He plays Trump. He puts makeup on like Trump. He puts lifts in his shoes. He fixes his hair weird. I mean, and then he literally can parrot what Trump has said in a way that is just uncanny. And I know that, I don't think there was anything she was surprised by because she had been so well prepared.
Were you surprised it worked? I mean, one of the things she did, Biden was focused on the idea that Trump is a threat to democracy, which is exhausting, right? To have to fix that. And she had more world leaders think he's a disgrace. You talked about that a lot. It didn't work as well when you did it. Is it better to have a campaign strategy that depicts him as weak rather than dangerous? You had talked for many years about the dangers of Donald Trump, but it seems baked into his the 20-30% of his constituency that just doesn't care. Do you think it was a better tactic to use that now?
I think one follows the other. When I was running against him and debating him, all most people knew about him was that they'd seen him on TV and he was a really successful businessman who was strong and tough and fired people and all of that. They didn't know anything more about him, and they didn't really pay a lot of attention to the things he was saying because he was just so entertaining, and it was like watching, a train wreck. They couldn't believe what's he going to say next, who's he going to insult next. It was very entertaining, kind of the sequel to The Apprentice. So I had to do a lot of things at once, and it was to warn people. In my convention speech, I said, you can't trust a guy with nuclear weapons who can be baited by a tweet. So, we did both. We tried to sound the alarm about danger, but we also, tried to ridicule him, which was so well deserved. I think 8 years on, and especially 4 years of his presidency, people could see that he did things they were worried about. Part of the reason he lost in 2020 was because of the very bad way he handled COVID. So people were like, hey, God, I don't want to go through that again. And then the idiocy about drink bleach and all the rest of it. So I think there was a kind of platform that had been established that he's both dangerous and he is ridiculous and a disgrace. So trying to...
Which she did in the speech, in the convention speech, which was, he is in many ways unserious, but he's dangerous.
Exactly. You can be both. You can be absurd, which he is in so many ways, in the way he talks, the way he behaves. We threw everything at him in 2016, trying to see what would stick because it was so new to people. She has greater range. We tried to define him as corrupt and mean and narcissistic and unprepared and impulsive, all of which he is. But we couldn't break through for a lot of different reasons. Now I think people have enough experience with him. They may still vote for him because they may still decide that, he may be all these things, but I still like X or Y about him.
Right.
But they can't say they weren't warned. They can't say that they didn't have that information.
Well, we'll talk about that because optics are everything. Biden lost voter confidence because he seemed kind of lost in split screen moments there. It was a huge issue for you in that horrible second debate in 2016 where he was basically stalking you on stage, which we've talked about before. One of the things I said about before the debate, that Harris needs to win over men and Trump needs to stop repelling women. Looking at this from your perspective, trying to win over swing voters, what do you think the has to happen next with Harris and Trump? I know you don't want to give advice to Trump, but what do you think he has to do and she has to do now?
Well, I think what he should do, he's incapable of doing. He is so clearly comfortable only being divisive and dark. He doesn't have an optimistic view of America, and he doesn't think it's in his political interest to have one. So he can't expand his reach very far. He has to keep hammering the people who already are attracted by that dystopian view of our country and make sure that they actually turn out and vote for him. She has to do what she did so well in her speech at the convention, what she did on the debate stage, which is to reassure people she's going to be the president of everybody. She is not going to be the president just for Black women, children of immigrants, Democrats. I mean, she's the president for everybody. And she must have said that 2 or 3 times. And it's something that I thought was really important for her to do, because it's a stark contrast to him.
Right. I'm here for everyone.
Yeah. And I think she very effectively did reach out to swing voters. I mean, she talked about small businesses. She talked about the opportunity economy. She talked about making home ownership affordable for people. So this was very intentional. She wanted to expose Trump, which she did very well, but she also wanted to speak directly to the camera, to those, if there are undecided voters, swing voters, however you characterize them, about both her temperament, that I am on your side. I am going to be your president.
I seem presidential.
And seem presidential and tough, commander-in-chief-ish, and also talk about her policies. So she's got a much more difficult task than he does, because he just, bears down on what he's always done and what works for him. But I think she's got much more ground that she can cover now. And the thing that I really liked about her performance is that she stood up to him, which you have to do. She exposed him, but she did it as a joyful warrior. I mean, she kept that smile on her face. Some Republican MAGA types criticize her for having expressions. Well, you know what? I found that very relatable.
Appealing.
Because, he would say these ridiculous things and she would have the same look that a normal person would have hearing this from a guy, at the grocery store that you ran into.
Right.
So I thought she handled her assignment extremely well. And it was, it was very different from what I faced in 2016. Sure. And she was able to kind of pocket some of what I tried to do.
100%.
And also having the knowledge that enough people knew about him to be able to go from there. I think she also did very effectively something that I want to see her do a lot of between now and the election, and that was to reference what other leaders around the world, but also people in our own country, national security leaders, defense leaders, people who had worked with Trump. They're all coming out and sounding the alarm about him. That has to be front and center. You need to do everything you can in this election to put people who should and do know better on the defensive, to justify being for somebody whose chief of staff from the White House says is untrustworthy and should not be near power, whose national security advisor, former defense secretary, the list goes on. And, part of what I tried to do in this book was to talk about the stakes. It is, of course,
which you do,
an election between the Democratic, the Republican nominee, but it's so much bigger than that. And
100%, which you point out. What's hard for you is you were defined by, you talked about the right wing, vast right wing conspiracy. People make fun of you. Often it's what's happened with you. It's kind of interesting is you say something, people make fun of you, which you note in the book, and then it turns out you're right. I've seen so many tweets that looks like Hillary Clinton was right. Looks like which is fun. You enjoy it. I think you enjoy it.
I have to at this point in my life,
Yeah, because what the hell? But there was a vast right-wing conspiracy against you.
It certainly was and still is.
They managed to define you, and they haven't managed to define her. Let me ask you just a few more questions about this, and I want to get to your role going forward and what things you have in the book. If undecided voters want more policy details from her, Trump was hardly bursting with policy ideas. He said he had a concept of a plan for healthcare. And of course, they don't want any from him, which is interesting.
Right.
Does she have to do it? Because this is, it seems like sometimes it's like she lands the plane and then they're like, well, we'd like you to try it again. And she lands the plane.
She does not have to do it, Kara. I'm going to just cut to the chase. In fact, She's put out policies on her campaign website. Anybody who's truly interested can go and read about them. She referenced policies. She actually doesn't just have policies and concepts. She has, plans about what to do. She's got the good things that she was part of in the Biden administration. She can continue to talk about and even, I think, highlight the jobs that are being created, clean energy, all of that. I think it's it's a double standard, and it's a double standard that is partly because they are still getting to know her, but also because they're still grappling with the idea like, oh, am I really going to vote for a woman to be president and commander-in-chief? I mean, I really, really have to think about this. Well, maybe I need to know more. I don't want to make a mistake. And this is particularly true, let's just say it and underline it, for white women. I was told by Adam Grant, whom I'm sure you know.
I do. I just interviewed him.
Before the 2016 campaign, that my biggest problem would be white women. And he basically said it's because they have a lot of conflicts in their lives. They don't want any more conflicts. Their husbands have set views about politics, or their employers, or whoever the men in their lives are. And it will be really hard to deal with that. Now, we have a huge gender gap in this election, as we always do, but it's even bigger now because abortion has triggered a lot of women who are ordinarily Republican-leaning or certainly independent. And so Kamala has that enormous gender gap. It's in her favor, but it has to get even bigger in order to win these swing states, particularly Pennsylvania, which is a challenge. And policy is not going to do it. Policy details, I should say, are not going to do it. Where she stands on abortion, where she stands on a real plan to deal with immigration at the southern border, which she cannot say enough Donald Trump actually stopped.
Yeah, she does that.
Where she plans on gun safety. She's a gun owner. And, so is her vice presidential candidate. They're not going to go for people's guns, but they're going to try to prevent children from being slaughtered in schools.
Right.
I put out more policy than anybody, I think,
you and
ever
Elizabeth
has.
Warren, right? You wonks.
Well, Elizabeth took she came after me, and she did her part, and I'm grateful to her.
She's wonkier than you. You're pretty wonky. You're wonky, but she wins wonk, top wonk.
And I talked about the economy every day, but literally, after the election, I was told that I never talked about the economy. They did one of those word bubble things. Right. And, campaign policy is really about showing that you can govern with your values in a way that's going to improve people's lives. Right. And everything about Harris's policies, really speaks to the overall messaging, which is, I'm going to help you. I'm going to protect you. I'm going to try to provide opportunity for you. And, even the things that sometimes, more progressive, more left-leaning voters might get a little worried about, like, okay, fracking, we have to transition out of it, but right now it provides jobs for people, and I understand that. And we're going to focus on renewable energy, but we're not going to, put people out of work. I mean, she is being the pragmatic person that a president has to be if you want to get things done.
A consensus thing. A last thing on the thing, Harris received the endorsement of Taylor Swift. Her custom URL drove more than 330,000 people to vote at vote.gov in less than 24 hours. She's already potentially pushing registrations. You've had plenty of celebrity endorsements over the year. Just curious. Of course, Taylor Swift herself was triggered by Donald Trump doing fake AI. And she did it in a very deft way, saying, you can vote for who you want, but you should do your research. I did my research. And then signed it, of course, Childless Cat Lady, which is the gift that keeps on giving. From J.D. Vance, that terrible, terrible politician in so many ways. And whether you agree with him or not, he's a terrible politician. So you certainly were on the receiving end of those. Does it matter, or is just this particular woman matter?
I think it does matter, because sometimes voters can use that as a doorway into deciding to vote. Oh, hey, my favorite singer, my favorite actor, my favorite athlete, is for this candidate. But I think Taylor Swift brings an unusual impact to an endorsement. I think her fan base is so intense and incredibly influenced by her. She, yes, is a singer who charts the course of her life, which they relate to as their own lives. But she's also somebody who stood up to a guy who groped her. She stood up to get her music back from somebody she thought had, illegitimately taken it from her. as she has become, a mature woman from, literally the first time we saw her, she was, 13, 14, 15 years old. She has demonstrated a resilience, and not just in her love life, which she's told us all about, but in, taking control over her own life in a way that I think sends a strong message to people who follow her. I'm a huge admirer of her as a person. And so I think that endorsement, and as you rightly said, it's already driven registrations of voters. She mentioned voting, registration again when she won yet another award. So I think this has real impact.
I do too. It was interesting because I thought, oh, please, Trump, don't say a stupid thing about her, right? Just say nothing or move along. And his spokesman called her a teeny bopper. And I was like, what do you live in the 50s? What?
Yeah. Well, he had his alter ego, Elon Musk, say something really rotten and creepy about her.
Please comment on that. It was what Elon said. It was he essentially would have a baby with her or forcibly have a baby with her. And then
impregnate her. Which, is kind of another way of saying rape, I think.
Right. I agree with you.
I can't understand, why he says what he says. You and I have talked about this before. It just is beyond my imagination.
Well, Hillary is a horrible person. That's why. But go ahead.
Well, but when I see Trump or I see him, but, really the whole cast of these MAGA characters, and especially the so-called masters of the universe in the technology world, misogyny is such a part of their worldview. And they gravitate toward, toughness and brutality and machoism. And, here's Taylor Swift, a self-made billionaire who brings joy to people, who imparts life lessons, particularly to girls and women. They can't stand it. And I think it was really going to trigger Trump. I mean, if it had happened before the debate, it would have overpowered the debate. The fact that it happened right after the debate and just added to Kamala's momentum must have just set them all off.
We'll be back in a minute. Support for this episode comes from SAS. How is AI affecting how you learn, work, and socialize? And what do you need to know to make responsible use of it as a business leader, worker, and human in the world? Find out when you listen to Pondering AI, a podcast featuring candid conversations with experts from across the AI ecosystem. Pondering AI explores the impact and implications of AI, for better and for worse, with a diverse group of innovators, advocates, and data scientists. Check out Pondering AI wherever you get your podcasts. Support for this show comes from Delete Me. Do you ever wonder how much of your personal information is out there on the internet? A lot. Chances are a lot more than you think, too. Your name, contact info, social security number, they can all be compiled by data brokers and sold online. It's happening right now. It might be why you keep getting those insane spam calls about your student loans, even if you paid them off 20 years ago. And worse, you may want to try Delete Me to fix that. Delete Me is a subscription service that removes your personal information from the largest people search databases on the web, and in the process helps prevent potential ID theft, doxing, and phishing scams. I have really enjoyed Delete Me, largely because I'm a pretty good person about tech things, and I have a pretty good sense of privacy and pushing all the correct buttons. But I was very surprised by how much data was out there about me. Take control of your data and keep your private life private by signing up for Delete Me. Now at a special discount to our listeners today, get 20% off your Delete Me plan when you go to joindeleteme.com/Kara and use the promo code Kara at checkout. The only way to get 20% off is to go to joindeleteme.com/Kara, enter the code Kara at checkout. That's joindeleteme.com/Kara, code Kara. Support for On with Kara Swisher comes from Greenlight. As a parent, I can tell you we all want to set our children up for success, but it doesn't stop with extracurriculars or helping them with their homework. There are some lessons you can do outside the classroom, like learning financial literacy. That's where Greenlight comes in. Greenlight is a debit card and money app for families. Parents can keep an eye on kids' spending and money habits, and kids can learn how to save, invest, and spend wisely. Plus, with the Greenlight Infinity Plan, you can get even more financial literacy resources, and teens can check in thanks to family location sharing. I've gotten to try out Greenlight with my family, and I think it's really important for your kids to understand how money works and how it's spent. They learn about a lot of other things and do not learn enough about financial literacy, so it's critically important to do that in a fun and interesting way, too. Join the millions of parents and kids who use Greenlight to navigate life together. Sign up for Greenlight today and get your first month free when you go to greenlight.com/Kara. That's greenlight.com/Kara to try Greenlight for free. greenlight.com/Kara. So a couple more things. I want to talk about your role. How do you look at it? I mean, it's kind of shifted in an interesting way. Because one of the things, the Atlantic wrote that you were approaching icon status to a younger gen. Now you're cool again, Hillary, just so you know.
Just live long enough, Kara.
Live long enough. Well, you obviously spoke at the convention, and you gave sort of a speech talking about sort of the defining nature of what had happened previously, and a little bit about, your role in it. I'm going to play a moment from the speech in a second, but first talk about your role.
My role is really what I choose it to be these days, which is a great privilege.